Shame is such a huge magnet, huh?
It's huge.
How does shame start? Is that a fair question about shame?
I think it starts with the parent-child relationship not being right.
Is shame originally a positive thing? There must be is there a certain value to a little bit of shame? Like, what is a little bit of shame called? It's like,
so some people have tried to make a distinction around healthy shame versus toxic shame.
right, okay.
But to me, healthy shame is actually guilt.
Okay.
So guilt is if I do something that violates love, I tell a lie, I hit somebody, I cheat on them, I should feel guilty.
Right, that's natural.
Because that motivates me to get back to a loving, healthy situation. Because as long as I stay in stuff that violates love, I'm destroying relationships. I'm making a worse life for myself. So guilt is a good thing, and I can resolve guilt. So it's about what I do that violates love. Shame is about who I am. It's nothing about what I do.
Wow. So that's huge to notate those two things. Like, it can be okay to feel some guilt about things. It's important. That's me getting a sign like, hey, man, it's almost like a U-turn sign. It's
Exactly.
like a good road sign, really.
Exactly.
Even though it hurts some, you need that because it helps you recognize that you're going against love.
Exactly.
You're doing something against love. But then shame is unhealthy.
And I can do nothing about it. So shame is about who I am, that I'm not good enough.
Right. Shame, I then attach whatever I did immediately, and that feeling.
And that's where the two then feed each other. So
You are horrible.
As soon as I do something wrong,
right,
that proves my shame.
Right.
That I'm useless.
And that goes back to that child doing something wrong. Something's wrong in his world, in her world, and they don't know how to solve it because they're a child. So the only person in their world is them. So if something's wrong in their world, or they're not getting what they need, or their needs met, then of course it must be their fault.
Yeah. So that's
where shame builds.
Exactly.
Wow.
So that's where we say that a key part of complex trauma is false guilt. Mm-hmm. So you're made to feel guilty, though you've done nothing wrong, which then feeds shame. So dad says, I'm mad because you're a terrible kid. Well, no, that's not why dad's mad, or I drink because you're a terrible kid.
Yeah, dad's mad because he's a Lions fan, you know?
Exactly. And so it's you're now feeling I did something wrong, therefore I am wrong.
Right. Yeah. Man.
And so to help people heal, they got to deal with legitimate guilt, and they can fix that. They got to correct all the lies that led to false guilt. So every time that somebody's impatient with them, they go, oh, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. That's the other person's problem. Or somebody's upset with them because they said no. No, you set a good boundary. You shouldn't apologize for that, but they feel guilty. Or they relax for a few minutes. Oh, I'm lazy. No, you're not. You're relaxing. Yeah. So you got false guilt from lie after lie after lie. So you got to reprogram that. Then you got shame that I'm therefore not good enough, which is all based on lies. And that's all got to be reprogrammed. And that takes a ton of work.
Does it?
Yeah.
What does some of that work look like, if even...
Yeah, I would say shame to me is the biggest healing journey that comes out of complex trauma, and it takes the longest and takes years. Wow. Because there's so many thousands of subtle lies that people develop that they don't even realize.
Yeah.
And the problem is they get triggered easily, and then all of a sudden they're spiraling downhill that I'm a piece of shit, and they don't know why. But something's triggered an old lie that's led to that proves that I'm useless. And so there's a big journey in self-awareness and beginning to understand the lies that I believe that are below the surface, that are subconscious, beginning to understand the things that trigger that, begin to understand the patterns that take place once I'm triggered and where I spiral to, and stopping those patterns. That's the work. And so if I can give one other piece of teaching. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's so key with complex trauma to understand the two parts of the brain that are kind of the main things that motivate our behavior. So the limbic system, which is the emotion center, that's the child's brain. That
develops first.
Yes. Then the cortex that keeps growing to our 35-ish. The thinking, the executive function, it gets called, that processes information. The key thing about the limbic brain the child brain is its instant gratification focus. So child, do you want to do your chores or do you want to sit here and watch TV? Well, whatever makes me feel good.
Right.
So that determines what I want to do. And then whether I want to do something, I don't feel like it. I don't feel like doing that. Or I want a new puppy. I feel like feeding the puppy until I don't feel like feeding the puppy. So emotions guide my behavior, and everything is instant gratification focused.
Wow. And a lot of that, if you had trauma as a child, then you're still, that can be a pattern that you still continue. Because that's a lot of addicts.
So the key with that is that when fear is triggered, that's limbic brain. So if you're in complex trauma, you're in constant fear. So you're constantly in your limbic brain. So your cortex doesn't develop properly. So an adult or a teenager, they're going through gradually switching to their cortex and learning to think stuff through. Complex trauma, you're still in your limbic brain, still thinking only of instant gratification. What do I feel like? Everything is about emotions, even though you're not aware of your emotions. And so a huge part of what happens with shame when it's triggered is I could be living as an adult today out of my cortex, making good decisions, healthy decisions. When my shame gets triggered, it triggers my limbic brain again.
Wow.
And I go back to a child. And I think like a child, and I believe the lies of the child. And so what you realize is the battles in your brain between your cortex and your limbic brain, they believe two different things. Wow. Depends on what gets triggered.
Wow, it's almost like you have a heaven and hell right there, kind of.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's where people with shame, they can be doing wonderful, great in relationships, and their shame gets triggered, and all of a sudden they're destroying everybody, calling their kids terrible names, calling their partner terrible names.
Yeah.
And it's like, what just happened there? Well, you went to your limbic brain and you acted out of that shame lie. That's when the damage gets done.
So those triggers, huh? Those things, it's wild. You had to go back to that.
Yeah. So you can imagine, though, how long that would take to heal, because when that trigger hits, like it hits with an intensity of a locomotive, because it brings with it cortisol, it brings with it all the chemicals,
all the drugs, yeah.
And how do you stop that? Like the train's out of the station here, buddy.
Oh yeah, if somebody pulls up with a train full of drugs, dude,
it's gone.
I'm getting on to it.
Exactly.
I was going to tell you that right now, and I'll probably sit in business class, but yeah, my brother sometimes would say, trying to locate that shame and stuff, it was like taking pennies out of a bathtub.
Yes.
That's what he talks about it like sometimes.
Yes.
And some days you get a couple, and some days you don't even know you're in it.
Yeah. So as a person grows in healing, so let's say you would get triggered and you start spiraling, but you've got enough self-awareness, you'd catch yourself.
Right.
And I know what's going on here. Then you ground yourself, you regulate your emotions, and you get back to your cortex. And you go, hey, I'm believing lies there. I'm not that useless person.
Right.
And I don't have to do that. And so what you find is all of a sudden that spiral just stopped. So instead of being in it for 4 days, you're now only in it for 15 minutes. And you caught yourself. Now, there's going to be a bit of a hangover effect as you kind of keep working through emotions with it. But within a day, you're back to being in a pretty good place, and you've grown a little bit. And then because of that, you probably won't get triggered as intensely in that area again because you've grown. So that next time something happens, the trigger won't be intense and it won't be as frequent. And so over time, you're growing with greater in frequency and less intensity until you don't get triggered there anymore. But that can take a few years.
But it can happen.
It can happen.
Wow, it's really possible.
It is.